A lesson in life: privilege without affection becomes a wound, and wounds that are ignored seek relief in dangerous places. Olivia was born surrounded by comfort, but grew up longing for the basics: a hug, attention, someone who called her name with tenderness. Her father was always buried in government secrets, out of reach. Her mother vanished into screens and silence. At home, everything worked, except the family's heart. And when love doesn't show up, a child learns to protect themselves however they can. This channel is new, and it was created for one reason: to share real-life stories filled with life lessons, intense, emotional, and meaningful, meant to touch your heart and strengthen your mind. Every step of this journey is a reminder that self-worth and love are the true keys to living with hope and fulfillment. It's also a warning: neglect in parenting and emotional care can lead children down paths of pain and destruction. Subscribe now and walk with us on this new path. At school, Olivia smiled to hide her pain. She turned in assignments, made jokes, pretended she had everything under control. Inside, she piled up unanswered questions. If I disappeared, would anyone notice? On her 12th birthday, she promised herself she'd be strong, that she wouldn't be a burden. She got expensive gifts, but no long hugs. That was her first bitter victory. She held back her tears and realized from then on, she'd have to rely on herself. Adolescence hit like a wave. With no guide, she looked for numbness. She tried drugs, thinking she could handle it. The relief was short-lived, the emptiness came back stronger. She tried studying, tried being the perfect daughter, tried fitting into the picture of a perfect family. Every effort turned into pressure. Every pressure turned into guilt. And guilt demanded more escape. The cycle grew fast, echoing inside her head, taking over space, breaking connections. How many Olivias are out there? Children who smiled to hide their pain, who received expensive gifts but never a real hug. Boys and girls who grew up without love, trying to fit into images of perfect families until they lost themselves in guilt and escape. A lack of love today creates wounds that last a lifetime. But if children are loved now, tomorrow they'll become parents who love too, and won't turn into new Olivias. At 17, she looked around and saw a beautiful house that had never been a home. She decided to leave. She packed a few clothes, gathered what little courage she had left, and made a simple, radical choice. She walked away. No speeches, no dramatic notes, just a one-way ticket to another city, another state, another possible future. In her pocket, almost nothing. In her chest, the quiet hope that somewhere out there, a door might be open for a fresh start. The first days were hard. A waitress job, a small paycheck, addiction lurking like an old shadow. The world demanded quick answers, and she gave them however she could. Still, something changed. Olivia began to realize the strength she'd been searching for had always been inside her. Before falling asleep, she made a new promise, one as an adult now: I'm going to learn to take care of myself, no matter what. And here, the story makes its first quiet turning point. When someone chooses themselves, the road is still scary, but it's no longer the same. She thought leaving home would set her free, but she learned that running away isn't enough when the ghosts travel inside your own mind. Loneliness grew with every shift at the restaurant, and her pay barely covered rent for a tiny room. The old addiction crept back, demanding its due. One slip, and everything could collapse. And it was during that fall that she encountered a world most people refused to see: prostitution. What seemed like just another sentence ended up revealing something unexpected. On the streets, among judging glances and neon-lit corners, Olivia found sisterhood. Women with different stories but similar pains welcomed her as part of an unlikely family. There, without masks, they shared bread, confessions, even laughter. They weren't victims, they were survivors. And in the middle of all that, she started to sense that she mattered. One night, a coworker told her, "You've got the kind of presence people listen to, you speak, and we believe you." Those words stuck, because for the first time, someone saw a strength in her that had always been hidden. Even the client surprised her. Between abuse and disrespect, some showed up simply wanting to be heard. Men who confessed their loneliness, who carried stories of failure and regret. Olivia began to see these encounters as more than transactions, they were exchanges of humanity. She offered listening, and in return, she received respect, even friendship. She discovered she could form real connections in the most unlikely places. And that started healing the open wound from her childhood, being treated as a person, not an invisible burden. While her body was her currency for survival, her mind began exploring new territories. She learned to trust, to protect other women, to speak up for those without a voice. She realized that in this marginalized world, solidarity was the rule. And it was through caring for others, and being cared for, that a new sense of identity took root. Prostitution, often seen as degradation, became a space of empowerment. It didn't erase her pain, but it gave her dignity. And each night of survival became, paradoxically, a lesson in resilience. Olivia, once the little girl who begged to be seen, had grown into a woman learning to see others. She realized she wasn't just another face among many, she was someone capable of building community. That job, which had felt like a burden, was saving her life in ways she didn't fully understand yet. The road ahead would still be long, with hard falls still to come, but something was already different. She was finally beginning to understand what it meant to belong. The marks of addiction continued to follow her like persistent shadows. Every overdose was a cruel reminder that the line between life and death could be crossed in seconds. She'd wake up in hospitals with no memory of how she got there, surrounded by stares that mixed contempt and pity. Sometimes she promised herself she'd change, but the cycle always pulled her back. The streets offered belonging, but they demanded a heavy price. With every relapse, hope seemed to slip further away. It was at 35 that life placed her at a crossroads. After another overdose, Olivia opened her eyes and realized she was alone on a cold gurney, no friends, no family, only her shallow breathing proving she still had time. In that moment, a decision formed inside her: either keep destroying herself, or choose to live. And for the first time, the choice didn't come from empty promises, it came from a quiet, deep cry, born from the certainty that there was still something worth building. She sought help and enrolled in a recovery program. The first days were torturous, filled with memories, withdrawal, and the constant urge to give up. But something was shifting. Each therapy session, each conversation with people carrying similar wounds, made her feel less alone. She learned she could talk about her pain without shame. She also realized scars weren't signs of weakness, they were proof of survival. Slowly, new habits began to take shape. Yoga entered her life like a breath of air. Her body, once seen only as a tool for survival, became a temple of care. Meditation brought clarity to thoughts that had known nothing but chaos. Self-care became a sacred routine, and with every day of sobriety she accumulated, Olivia felt like she was rewriting her own story. It wasn't just about quitting drugs, it was about learning to exist without needing to run from herself. 10 years later, the woman who had nearly lost everything looked in the mirror with pride. The past was still there, but it no longer defined her. She had won sobriety, but above all, she had won herself. For the first time, she felt no anger, no shame, no need to justify who she was. She took a deep breath and understood, living, after all that chaos, was already a victory. Olivia had always believed starting over was possible, but she never imagined her biggest turning point would come in the most unexpected way. She had rebuilt herself through yoga, meditation, and 10 years of sobriety. She had learned to turn pain into wisdom, and loneliness into companionship with herself. But life still held one chapter that would flip the entire narrative upside down. At a mental health talk where she shared her story with at-risk youth, Olivia received an invitation that changed everything. A university wanted to document her testimony for a research project on resilience. What seemed like just another conversation would become something much larger. Her recorded story went viral. People from different countries saw themselves in the woman who had traveled from the abyss to clarity. The audience no longer saw her as an ex-prostitute or an ex-addict. They saw someone who had won private battles that millions fight in silence. She began receiving messages from women who, inspired by her journey, decided to seek treatment. He'd look at his phone, unanswered messages, bills stacking up, and just couldn't find the energy to do anything. The emptiness was complete. Nothing had color anymore. Nothing had meaning. Foods he once loved tasted like dust. Songs that used to lift his spirits now sounded like static from far away. Cocaine had stolen his ability to feel joy, and left him floating, completely lost. It was in this state that he got the news: his father had passed away, just 3 weeks after he'd tried to get clean. The blow hit like a tidal wave, washing away the last fragments of strength he had left. Michael didn't just lose his father, he lost every anchor that might have kept him from sinking. It felt like the whole world had crumbled in one breath. One quiet afternoon, crushed by grief, withdrawal, and despair, he walked into the garage. He found a rope, tied it to a hook, and stared at the empty space in front of him. This was it, the moment everything seemed ready to end. His thoughts weren't about drugs anymore, or Pamela, or work. They were only about peace. The idea of finally silencing the pain felt calm. Almost welcome. As he held the rope, something inside him wavered, between giving up and a quiet, barely audible whisper for help. In that second, he remembered his grandfather, a man who'd always been there during his childhood, steady and simple, giving him a sense of safety. The thought came without warning. He dropped the rope, ran to his phone, and dialed the number. When he heard his grandfather's voice on the other end, the tears came right away. With a trembling voice, he admitted he was lost, that he just didn't have the strength to keep going anymore. That call didn't fix everything, but it started something. For the first time in years, Michael had clearly said out loud that he couldn't do this alone. And in that moment, a new possibility opened up, asking for help instead of giving in. The conversation with his grandfather became his first real step forward. Michael wasn't met with judgment or blame. He heard just one simple sentence: "You don't have to carry this alone." Those words echoed through him like a lifeline, reminding him there was still a way out. From then on, the road was hard, full of setbacks and relapses, but also moments of clarity. He threw himself into therapy, faced wounds he'd buried for decades, and began to understand that cocaine wasn't the real problem. It was just the tool he used to escape the pain. Each therapy session, Michael let go of another layer of the armor he'd built around himself. He realized the perfect life he showed everyone had always been a facade. Behind it was a scared, lonely, broken man just trying to survive. That realization didn't heal him overnight, but it cracked open the door to real change. For the first time, he started looking at himself honestly, without pretending. It was during this process that he got the idea to share his story publicly. Michael knew thousands of people were stuck the way he'd been, ashamed to admit their addiction, convinced they were utterly alone. He started making videos, writing honest posts, opening up on social media. Instead of hiding his scars, he turned each one into a warning for others. Even though he lost millions of followers when the truth stopped being polished and became raw and real, he found something far more valuable: the peace of no longer having to pretend. He still faced crises. He still carried the weight of anxiety. But he learned that healing doesn't mean being perfect. Healing means showing up, even when you're shattered. It means learning to give your suffering meaning, not erasing it. Michael discovered that pain can become purpose when you have the courage to face it head-on. Today, Michael is a top executive at a major company. What his journey teaches us is simple, but deep: there's no shame in being hurt. True courage is reaching out for support. Running away might seem easier, but it's in accepting vulnerability that life finds room to grow again. Michael lost money, his marriage, his reputation. But by facing his fragility, he gained something no addiction could ever give him: the chance to start over in peace. He learned that asking for help isn't weakness, it's the first step toward rebuilding what seemed gone forever. His story reminds us that every failure hides a seed of rebirth. Falling doesn't mark the end of the story, it's just the moment you get to write a stronger, more human, more truthful chapter. And the lesson that stays with us is this: being broken isn't the end. Pain can become a new beginning, if you have the courage to face the truth. Because real healing never comes from outside. It starts within, the moment you stop pretending and choose to rebuild yourself. True strength in life is recognizing our vulnerabilities. Michael's journey shows us that every fall holds a lesson, and every wound can awaken courage. This channel is new, created to share stories that inspire, move, and renew. If this message touched your heart, subscribe and share. In the next videos, you'll find more stories that can reignite hope and love, the kind that truly transforms.